The bell tower ring. So I think that's a pretty good indication for us to get started. Good morning, everybody. We're delighted to have you join us for this quick webinar on moving language instruction online. We have all of your microphones muted. If there are any questions throughout this presentation and also at the end, please use the chat feature. You should see that either on top of your screen or on the bottom of your screen. There should be a little pop-up window that says chat, and both Sam and John are monitoring that. So if you have any questions, you can put those in there. But what we want to do this morning is just walk through some best practices for moving instruction online, and then also some considerations that are specific to language learning and teaching. So let's get started here. The most important thing, the most important message from the LRC is that we all need to breathe. We should remain calm and teach on and online. And we know that this is a very stressful time. One of my colleagues from Haystack, which is the Humanities, Arts, Science, and Technology Alliance and Collaboratory, this is an interdisciplinary community of humanists, artists, social scientists, scientists, and technologists. So Jacqueline, she said, "For the time being, I sincerely think it is worth treating this as unusual. An emergency response rather than expecting yourself to spin up a well-developed online course. As many people have noted, it takes training, resources, and technology with support to do online teaching as a regular practice." So I think we need to keep in mind that the experiences that we are creating for our students will not be identical to the face-to-face classroom experiences that they are receiving on our campuses right now, and that is perfectly okay. So let's keep that in mind, that we can't just flip a switch and simply move face-to-face teaching to online. There will have to be some concessions. We have to make certain decisions for how we want to share our content and engage with our students. And we want to walk through a few ideas and best practices of what you can do to prepare for this new teaching environment. So here's the outline of what we will cover this morning. Some general guidelines about moving instruction online, a quick note on backward design and flipped classrooms. Then we'll look at synchronous versus asynchronous instruction, talk a little bit more about how we can engage our students in this new virtual environment, and then comment on Zoom as well. And then we will leave time for questions at the end too. So similar to what we just said about remaining calm, is it's important that when you move your instruction online to keep things simple. You want to give yourself and your students a break, right? We will, as I just said, we will not be able to recreate the face-to-face classroom, and you really shouldn't hold yourself to that standard. So just triage what you can do. You're not going to be an expert in online language instruction overnight, and that is perfectly okay, right? So don't try to look for 15 new tools that you can include in your online teaching. Keep it to the basics and stick to what you know. And then if there are certain things that you think you might want to try out and you want to have a conversation with us about that, that is perfectly fine. An important thing to start out with is to consider your goals and expectations for your classroom. So you need to be able to set realistic goals given this new instructional environment. And I want you to think about both the pedagogical goals that you have for your students. So what do you want them to be able to do at the end of the semester? And then also think about communication goals. You need to let your students know what your plan is for a communication strategy. When are you availability for them to contact you to ask questions? What's your responsiveness within 24 hours? Clearly, you are not expected to be available 24/7, but just make sure that you communicate those goals to your students in terms of your responsiveness. When you consider your goals and your expectations for your classroom, make sure that you prioritize. So here are some questions to help you think about that. So what do you think you can realistically accomplish during this time period that we are moving instruction to the virtual environment? How do you need to adjust your revisional syllabus and your schedule? You will likely not be able to cram everything in as you would have in a regular face-to-face setting. How can you add more structure and also accountability to assignments? How can you keep your students engaged with the course content? And just for everybody from Cornell, a quick note on the Vice Provost of Undergraduate Education's definition of substantive contact. So we are supposed to maintain substantive contact with our students. And that means at least 2 hours of active faculty-student interaction each week. That can take a variety of forms. So for example, online office hours would be considered substantive contact, discussion forum, participation where you chime in on what your students are discussing, responding to student questions via real-time email or other forms of communication. So that's the minimum here. In terms of your content delivery, there are different options that we will talk about in a moment here. But really, I think you need to step back and look at what is still on your course schedule and what's in your syllabus and how you can adapt to make sure that you can cover all of this in this new educational environment. Communication, I already talked about, that is key. It's very important for our students that we stay transparent with them. Students are as confused and scared about this move as we are. And I think just having continuous open conversation with our students is very important. Be flexible. When students have questions, try to answer them. If you don't know the answer, that's perfectly fine. We can help in finding answers for you and for students as well. But just having open communication is going to be important. And listen, be compassionate to your students as well. Again, this is stressful for everybody, including the students, including the parents as well. So just using common sense and being a little bit more flexible with our communication style and with our structure and our syllabus will go a long way. So as you review the course schedule, again, just make sure to think about what you want to keep, identify your priorities, really what is the ultimate outcome that you want your students to be able to do at the end of the semester. And then think about how you can create new opportunities for students to continue what they would do in a regular face-to-face classroom. So what options for discussion forums or group work are there? How can you collect different assignments? And just thinking about how can you continue to engage your students and engage them with one another and also with your course content. We will talk a little bit more in a moment here about synchronous versus asynchronous instruction. Are there certain things that simply have to happen in a face-to-face contact? Or are there things where you can move it to online delivery that's asynchronous, where students don't have to be online real-time with you? And I think this is one piece where language instruction is a little bit different from many other subjects, because we do want our students to be able to utilize the language, engage with one another with the language. And so there are various ways how we can ensure that our students still practice their oral skills online, either with one another or with you, and where you can chime in, listen, and that can both happen synchronously and asynchronously. I already briefly mentioned this before as well. Don't overcomplicate things right now. I think you want to keep things simple and easy for you and also for your students. So pick tools and approaches that are familiar to you and your students. If there are new tools that you're interested in using, you can do that, but don't overwhelm yourself or your students with adding 10 new apps that would allow your students to do speaking practice online. We're not going to talk about very specific third-party vendors here. If there are certain programs that you're interested in, you can come to the LRC or contact us and we can talk through some ideas. But again, I think the most important thing is that you put your pedagogy first. So the notion of backward design, start with your results and the learning goals for your students. What do you want them to be able to do? From there, you move to thinking about what is the acceptable input? What do your students need and how will you assess what you are doing and what your students are doing? And then based on that, you plan these virtual learning experience and your instructional methods. So start from the back, start with the goals, think about the input and the assessment, and then you devise the methods and you think about what online platforms should you be using and what online technologies can help support, get your students to these ultimate learning goals. I'm sure everybody has also heard about the flipped classroom, so here's a nice visual for that. And you can think about the flipped classroom in terms of what will happen in a synchronous environment and also what will happen in an asynchronous environment. So asynchronous would be out of class, not in real time, and then synchronous would be in class. So one approach could be that you prepare certain assignments for the students to do at their own time. And then when you do meet with them synchronously, you have them apply new things that they learned, talk through concepts, apply the target language. You do that face-to-face basically in this online environment. And then again, after class at the student's own time, they can check their understanding. They have follow-up assignments, assessments, quizzes, tests, things like that. So that's one way to approach the new virtual environment. So you don't necessarily have to stick to your regular schedule of, say, 5 times a week for 50 minutes. Think about what would be the most appropriate schedule to attain your ultimate learning objectives for your students. So we've mentioned synchronous and asynchronous instruction a lot, just to make sure that everybody understands what we mean by these terms. Synchronous means that instructors and students are together at the same time and they interact in real time. So for everybody who's on the webinar live right now, this is synchronous. For everybody who will watch the webinar later, this will be asynchronous. So in asynchronous instruction, instructors prepare course materials for the students in advance. That allows the students to access the course materials at any time of their choosing. And this could be important if you know that you have some students who will travel back home to a time zone that's different from ours. So asynchronous instruction allows the students to interact with materials and with each other over a longer period of time where you don't have to be all online at the same time. Here is a quick overview of some of the advantages and challenges of both synchronous and asynchronous instruction. This was put together by colleagues at Stanford. There's a link on the slide as well. They have a very comprehensive resource that you can look at if you're interested. So in both modalities, of course, we have advantages and some challenges. And I think you need to think through again, what are your pedagogical goals and objectives, and which modality will best fit the educational needs of you and your students. So with synchronous instruction, the advantage is that it is very immediate, right? Students and you are together in the online environment. It helps with creating community. That is very important. Students have mentioned to me a lot their fear about not being able to interact with their friends and just physically be with their friends. And so if we can make an effort to create a community even in this virtual environment, I think this will help with students feeling isolated. In the synchronous environment, you can be more responsive because you're all together. Some of the challenges of a synchronous environment is that it can be challenging to schedule. Again, if our students are in different time zones, that can pose some difficulty. And we also need to consider that there may be technical challenges that our students may encounter and that we may encounter. Wi-Fi connections, for example, can drop. So it's always good to present content in various ways, even if you have synchronous instruction, you should still always make your notes available to the students in PDF format after. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment as well. Some of the advantages of asynchronous instruction is that you have much more flexibility in terms of time, space, and pace. So that can help make the experience more accessible for our students, and you also create an archive. So as I just mentioned, even though you may do certain things in a synchronous manner, you should still keep materials and archive them so that students can go back and maybe listen to something again later. Another advantage of asynchronous instruction is that it could be easier for students to engage with course materials simply because they have more time to process. Online learning will be a new experience for many of our students, and again, they're anxious, and so they might feel that they have to take copious notes if you have a virtual meeting with them. And so just assuring them that you are open for questions and that you will share your notes with them will help ease a little bit of that tension. Some of the challenges in asynchronous instruction goes back to that maybe students don't feel this personal connection, there is no community, lacking social interaction. So you need to think about ways, even if you engage in asynchronous instruction, how can you still foster engagement among students? Discussions, online discussion forums are one way where students can see what their peers are thinking. And that can happen at any time. Students don't have to be necessarily online at the same time for that. Another challenge can be if students can't ask you for clarification, sometimes course material may be misunderstood. So that's why I think a mix of both synchronous and asynchronous instruction is the best way forward to just leverage the advantages of both of these modalities here. When we think about asynchronous versus synchronous instruction, again, the most important thing is to consider your goals and expectations. What can you do asynchronously, but what needs to be done in a synchronous manner? If you decide to pre-record videos and lectures to share with students, you could use Zoom just like we are doing right now, and then share that in your learning management system, in Canvas, or through email or in other ways. So if you record videos, don't do what we are doing here, a long webinar where only one person is talking. That is boring. Probably most of you are checking your email right now or on social media. So we know to keep students' engagement, keep these videos short, 5 minutes max. And you can do a number of different videos focusing on different areas of your instruction. But it's best not to overwhelm students with long 15-minute lectures. And these videos should also ideally be lively. Keep in mind, these also don't have to be professionally created videos. So if you have false starts and ahs and ums, that's perfectly fine, because that actually is how you would be teaching in a face-to-face environment as well. Make sure you test your microphone before you start recording to ensure that it's actually on. It's very frustrating. That's happened to me many times in my online teaching. I'm done with recording my perfect 5-minute video only to realize that my microphone was muted, and then I had to start over. Something else to consider, and this is something that you want to check with your students on as well, ADA compliance, making sure that your materials are accessible to the greatest extent possible. If you have students with learning disabilities or any students who need special accommodations, that's an additional consideration, of course, when you have to move to an online environment. So depending on how you need to adjust your teaching strategies, feel free to talk to us and we can see what suggestions we may have to make sure that materials are accessible. But one way, again, I've already mentioned this, to make sure that you allow students just to review materials in different formats. So if you do something in a lecture, also provide the students with the PDF afterwards. Share the slides. You can use closed captioning. YouTube does that. There is a Zoom feature as well that can assist with that. And that's something where you may want to reach out to CTI for additional support. If you decide that creating video lectures is not your thing, that is perfectly fine as well. Don't feel compelled that you have to do something like that. So an alternative to doing video is you can annotate a slideshow or just any notes of what you want to present with additional notes, and then share a PDF document with your students. So you could just create something in a PowerPoint presentation, annotate that, or a Word document, and comment on something like that. You could also do that on a Google Doc where you leave comments for students, and that way they can see what you are going to present in a face-to-face environment, but you don't necessarily have to create this video. And then you can follow up with discussions in Canvas and provide your students with specific and structured questions that you want them to respond to. An additional idea, if you don't want to do video, is to also share links to outside resources that the students can engage with. For example, videos about the course content, readings about the course content. And again, I think thinking about mixing these various ways is probably the most engaging for your students. Just like in your regular classroom, you mix up your assessments and your activities and your assignments and your tasks. You want to maintain a similar flow in the virtual environment as well. So what do we do? How can we engage our students in this new virtual environment? I will start sounding like a broken record, but communication is huge. Make sure that you ask or that you tell your students what your expectations are. Rethink the activities that you would traditionally do in your face-to-face classroom and think about how you can make them interactive in this virtual environment. So I just mentioned discussions in Canvas. That's one way. So that can happen in a synchronous manner where students comment on each other's thoughts and ideas or practice their language skills in a written discussion. You could also use shared Google Docs for collaborative writing. That can happen both in a synchronous and an asynchronous manner. And again, with language instruction, we want to make sure that we provide opportunities for speaking practice. If you use Zoom, there are breakout rooms for group work that are fantastic to allow students to engage in group activities. And of course, this would apply to any subject matter. Group breakout rooms are always nice to, especially in larger classes, to have students engage with one another in a smaller setting. We have created some additional materials about how to use Zoom breakout rooms that are shared on our preparedness website for the LRC. So we're not going to go into too much detail here. There is a voice recording feature in Canvas where you can ask your students, instead of just continuously typing their responses, they can record their responses so you can check on their spoken proficiency and their progress there as well. So there are two ways how you can do that in Canvas. You can do that in an assignment and allow to have the student record their voice through what's called media recording, or also in a quiz. If you add an essay question, students can select to record or upload media, and that could be their voice and or video. So multiple ways of how you can continue to engage students with speaking practice. And again, that can happen both synchronously and asynchronously. We already talked about this. Very important to share materials in various ways as PDFs. If you share it as a PDF, it's more easily accessible on mobile devices as opposed to sharing a Word document. So that's something to keep in mind. And another way to engage students, and this is not new or unique to the virtual environment, many of our colleagues do this already in their face-to-face classrooms as well, but you can use entry and exit tickets. And basically, these are questions or prompts that you have your students respond to very quickly at the beginning and at the end of the class. And what you want to do with these questions, you want to frame them in such a way that they actually provoke some deeper response rather than just a yes or no question. So depending on what your course content is, ideally those are questions where students think about how they can engage with one another, engage with the course content, and you can use that then even as a foundation to start your lesson for the day, cycle back to it at the end, or if it's an exit ticket, use something that comes up that students have been learning, have been engaged with as the foundation for the next class. Or sometimes students pose questions, mention things that they haven't understood, but that's a quick and easy way also in large classes to check on attendance and make sure that students still feel that the online class is not just delivery where they have to listen and students have no agency. So just ensuring that our students continue to be active participants in our learning. Now, one thing that I just want to stress again is that it is very important that we help prepare our students for this new virtual environment right now while we still see them on campus. So we know students are worried about feeling isolated. They're also panicked about how will this move to online instruction affect their grade. So if you still see your students now on campus, talk to them right now. Show them how to navigate in this online environment. While you're in the face-to-face classroom now, pull up Zoom, pull up Canvas, and just make sure that they get a little bit of an introduction to this new environment. So again, this will help create community among the students, allow them to practice while they're still on campus. So if there are questions, they can ask you, or they can check in with the Center for Teaching Innovation or a central IT. So as I just mentioned, go through Canvas, go through Zoom. If there are any other tools that you know that you will use that students may not be quite as familiar with, test this out before they leave for spring break. And then do reassure your students about grades and let them know that high stakes assessments won't happen immediately in an environment that's completely new to them. So slowly ease them into this new environment as well, and assure them that this is trial and error for everybody and that we're all learning together. So the university is suggesting the use of Zoom for synchronous instruction, and we just wanted to point out a few technical considerations. Our students will very likely connect on Wi-Fi connections when they are leaving campus, and there is usually a limit to how much a Wi-Fi connection can handle. So just make sure that you yourself and also your students limit other streaming services while they are doing classwork. So they shouldn't also have 5 movies running on Netflix and be on Apple Music. That can help with the stability of the connection. Also, what helps is to connect audio via a phone rather than a computer, or rather than the computer. So when you connect to Zoom at first, Zoom asks you how to connect. And most often people connect via the computer, but if students have a particularly weak Wi-Fi signal, it might be easier for them to call in on their phone, listen in on the phone, but then still see everything that's happening on the screen. Another way to help with the strength of the Wi-Fi connection is to tell your students to stop their own video cameras. That takes up quite a bit of bandwidth, and so if Wi-Fi connections are a little bit iffy, then it's okay for the students to stop their video. Another thing that is helpful is to use headphones. That goes for when you record something for your students to watch, but also just to reduce background noise and back channeling. It's easiest if you have headphones in with a microphone, an external microphone attached, if you have those available. I mentioned our Google Drive earlier, so we are in the process of creating so-called cheat sheets and additional tutorials that is linked on our preparedness website. And one of the things that we are looking at is Zoom and also Canvas. Now, some pedagogical considerations for Zoom. We already talked about live classes, so what I am doing right now is I'm sharing my screen with you, and we have the chat feature open at the same time. So that's a great way to do synchronous instruction. Your students can follow along. Depending on how many students you have, you could allow them at a certain point during something that you present to stop in, and they can ask questions either on the chat or live. So that's a great way to engage your students. We already mentioned the breakout rooms on Zoom, so those are very effective for small class discussions. You determine when and how groups break up, how long students have in those breakout rooms together, and when to bring them back together. And the great thing is you also can join all these different breakout rooms and move among them. So this is a very effective way for you to manage groups online, very similar to if you have your students do group work in the class and you circulate. You can't always check in on everybody, but you can walk from group to group and check in with them and see what they're doing. So we can recreate this face-to-face environment in the breakout rooms on Zoom. And Zoom actually also has a really great video that walks you through how to create those breakout rooms in addition to the materials that we provide and that CTI provides. So we want to close with just remembering that this is a time of some uncertainty, new extenuating circumstances. People are stressed. Our students might be playing it cool, but underneath they really are worried. So make sure to be kind to yourself, be kind to your students, try to be flexible, available, compassionate, and understanding. And take care of yourself. Self-care is very important. This is a new experience. It's a new experiment, and know that there are many resources available at the institution here locally, at the LRC, at the Center for Teaching Innovation, and do take advantage of those resources. I've mentioned our preparedness website. The link to that is lrc.cornell.edu/COVID-19. And there's a host of information on here. Can you guys still see that new screen? Yes, excellent. Thanks, Erin. So a brief introduction here with lots of links. So on the left-hand side, you can navigate quickly through here. We will post the recorded webinar on here as well. We have a section on general technologies and strategies for virtual instruction. This is where our Google Drive folder is connected as well. CTI has a number of webinars on strategies for moving online, getting started in Canvas, Zoom, Panopto. So those are very useful resources as well. We have a whole host of additional links to different resources. And the thing is, there are so many things that are available right now. Try not to get overwhelmed by all these things. If you have specific questions, reach out and ask someone rather than trying to find solutions online by yourself, because you will get from one thing to the next, and then 3 hours have passed and you still don't have an answer to the question that you were trying to solve. We also have a section specifically for language learning and teaching. IELT, the International Association for Language Learning Technology, is planning a series of webinars that are dedicated to thinking about how to engage students in this, language students in this new environment as well. That's being planned right now. Locally here at the LRC, we have licenses to PlayPosit and Schola. Schola actually provides you content, so do check that out. PlayPosit is just an online platform. There is no content there, so if you haven't worked with PlayPosit yet, now is probably not the time to start digging into that. But then there are a whole host of other apps if you are interested. But again, I think unless you have a specific pedagogical goal in mind, don't start playing around with new tools. The Tech Center at the University of Hawaii has a series on blended learning essentials for world languages. They're still in the process of rolling those out. And while that is looking at a blended environment, so a mix of face-to-face and virtual instruction, I think some of the principles and ideas that they are talking about are still applicable to you as well. So that's something else that you could look at. And then we will build our FAQ section here. If you have any specific questions, we ask that you share them via this short one-question Qualtrics survey that's posted up on our website here. It will help us manage an influx of incoming communication. So rather than sending emails to us, please use this survey here. So those were the remarks that we had planned. At this point, we are happy to take questions right now, or we also can address those questions after the fact on our FAQ.
All right, and we do have a couple of questions queued up here already, so I'll scroll back here. One of the questions I got was about YouTube and Zoom being able to do closed captions in languages other than English. And both services do have closed captioning features, but Zoom is manually entered. So I think that would be a personal consideration of whether or not that's worth the time commitment of someone actually going through and closed captioning the meeting in real time, or whether a separate text supplement would be the way to go. YouTube has a number of languages, but their auto-generated captions are suspect often. So again, planning on closed captioning the video may not be the way to go, but if it is, you can upload your own captions if that's the way you want to go.
And I think, presuming that you are capturing a presentation, you will probably have a lot of text in your presentation in the target language already anyway. So that's a good start already. But if you have additional notes about what you are presenting, again, you could also just upload that as a PDF so that the students have that available if closed captioning isn't automatically available for your target language.
And we had another question. There was some interest in breakout rooms, and Dorina did mention that CTI has a webinar coming up that will walk you through that. We also have resources in the Google Drive that we mentioned that talk more in depth about using breakout rooms, which can be a very useful tool for maintaining group work in this setting.
Are there any other questions right now? And you can also feel free to unmute your microphone if you would like to ask it live or on the chat. Okay. Well, as you think of any questions, send them to us via that one question survey. If you are still in Stimson, you can swing by. We are here to help. We will post the recording of this webinar on our preparedness website. And then as we get more questions, we will build our FAQ page. So remember, this is an exciting new experiment. Be patient with yourself. We're all learning, and don't set the expectations for yourself too high. Some people have been doing this for 20 years and they're still learning new things every day. So just make sure that you set expectations and communicate those with your students, and then try to be as flexible as possible. And if there are any questions or concerns, please do stop by the LRC. We are here to help. So with that, we wish you good luck and let us know what we can do to help. Auf Wiedersehen.